Okay, so this was round 3 of the Chicago Open, and I was paired against a 2168 rated 10-year-old. In this tournament, I played the number 7 highest rated 10-year-old in the United States, and then like 2 or 3 rounds later, I played the number 8 rated 10-year-old who was also 2160 and 10 years old. So, you know, I'm doing my best here. For people who don't know, I feel like there's some new people in the chat or in the audience in general. For this tournament, I didn't do opening prep. I just like spun a wheel, and then whatever it landed on, I was gonna study for 2 weeks and then play. But then I got sick, and then there was the fire, and then there was the tornado. So I didn't really actually look at these openings. Thankfully, I had white, so, you know, it tends to be okay. But what it landed on for white was the King's Indian attack. You know, if you remember back from the ChatGPT video, we spun the wheel and we landed on the e4 move order for the King's Indian attack. And the only thing we really knew was how to play against the e6 structure. My opponent played c5, to which I played knight f3. And this looks really normal so far. It just looks like a regular Sicilian. And then after d6, all right, I'm going to propose, I'm going to give you 2 options. You're playing a 10-year-old who's almost 2200. Would you like to enter an open Sicilian, likely a Najdorf, against the 10-year-old? Or just play d3 and sacrifice any morals or values about chess that we once had? And I chose the latter. So I played d3 in this position, which is like the lamest looking move ever. However, it's fine because I'm gonna fiend kettle the bishop. Okay? Alright, he goes knight f6. Very logical. I go g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, castles. These moves are automatic. d3 Fischer approved. That is true, kind of. So I go knight b to d2 because that's my system. And again, the only plan that I knew was against the e6 d5 structure, where you go rook e1, e5, like h3, knight h2, you could go f4, knight g4, trade things off on the dark squares. That's all I knew. But this is not that. This is a different pawn structure. And after knight c6, I was like, all right, well, if I go rook e1, what if he just goes e5? And then, like, what is my rook doing on e1? It's quite stupid, you know? Like, in this case, the rook will probably be better on f1, and maybe I play f4. So I didn't want to do that, but also, like, what am I supposed to do? Now, I was also hesitant to go with the other plan that I knew, which was h3, knight h2, because I was worried that if he just goes bishop d7, and I go knight h2, I already can't defend this pawn on h3. That's the difference. There's no pawn on e6. So I was feeling a little nervous. I guess if my arrow meant that if bishop d7, I would have just played rook e1. I guess. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me, though, because then the e5 thing is still true. Perhaps I just put the king on h2 and chill. So I played h3 as a little bit of a waiting move, because if he goes e5 now, great. Then my rook isn't misplaced. And if he goes e6 now, like he did in the game, I go rook e1, and now e5 will take 2 moves. So this is a slight improvement, I thought. And if not, he has to play for d5, and then suddenly I have a position I understand a little bit. So I was very, very happy here. So my opponent plays d5, and I am elated, you know? This is everything I want. So here's the problem, though. If I go e5 and I try to lock everything down, cut the board in half, go for the dark squares, he goes knight d7, and he's already got 3 boys looking at the e-pawn, and I have 2, and there's no way to add a 3rd defender. So I can't play e5. I need to prepare it in some way. A few themes that I had in my games in the Chicago Open were, number 1, I was trying not to make any unnecessary pawn moves. Just don't do it, because you know how I am about weaknesses. If I can avoid making weaknesses, why wouldn't I do that? So I was avoiding unnecessary pawn moves and also unnecessary complications. I was sticking with positions that made sense to me, not that I thought would make sense to the computer. So just backstory there. So I go knight h2, which does a few things. If I go e5 now, f4 will be possible. So it's kind of saying, maybe I'll play e5. What are you going to do? But it's also being very flexible. It still has this plan of maybe putting the knight on g4 and, you know, attacks happen on one color square. And it's happening on the dark squares if it's happening. So if I trade off the dark squared bishop, that would be quite favorable, especially if I keep my dark squared bishop. So I like this plan, although it needs preparation. So my opponent goes b5, which is like very normal and thematic. He's trying to get play on the queen side. I'm going to try to play on the king side. Now, what is a move I can make that's non-committal, but is also productive? And sure, you'll probably find a better move than I played. In most cases. These explanations are very nice to listen to. I'm glad that somebody gets something out of it. c3? Okay, so let's talk about c3, right? That seems really like it makes a lot of sense. A little bit. So c3, and you're like, okay, this bishop's not that great if I do that. And then maybe I can move my bishop out. It vaguely controls the center. It seems like I'm not really committing to anything because it's like a small pawn move. But that's the last thing I want to do. The absolute last thing I want to do is push a pawn unnecessarily. And c3 is exactly that. Because, first of all, it gives him a hook. It actually, in my opinion, speeds up his counterplay. Number 2, d3 becomes weakened. And I just didn't want to deal with that. King h1 is a suggestion for a nothing move. That's fair. That's very much a nothing move. Z-Villain says knight f3. Which knight? I assume you mean the one that wasn't just there. That's what I played. I played knight d to f3. Even though I talked a lot about e5 and f4, those are both very committal pawn moves. Like f4 especially. Knight f3 is like generally useful. It makes it so I can develop my dark squared bishop. I still have the knight g4 at some point if I want. And in this case, maybe I'll play e5, and then after knight d7, now I have bishop f4. Because I'm not sure about the e5 f4 thing when maybe his queen comes to b6. I don't know. I have a lot of pawns that I pushed in front of my king. It's a little bit nerve-wracking. a4, I think a4 is always something that's on my mind. It's definitely like, could be good to throw in at multiple points. But I thought that knight f3 was the most, like, you gotta get your pieces out move. Alright, so he goes bishop b7. Makes sense. And now I go e5. So I got to get e5 in, push his knight away from the king side, and I got to have my pawn on e5 without actually committing any more pawns. And on top of that, the g4 square is now available for a horsey. If he trades the dark square bishop off, the position is just bad. And meanwhile, my play is really simple. Like, I'll put a queen on d2, just like slowly improve. I can make him think I'm gonna do a lot of things, but right now there's no rush. Like, I'm just gonna slowly build up my position. I don't have to attack. Just because it's called the King's Indian attack, that doesn't mean I have to attack. Isn't this the game, Fisher? Maybe? I don't know. Probably not. You have to attack. You don't have to. All of my moves prepare for an eventual attack, but they are also good in the case that I don't attack. And that's the flexibility of it all. Alright, first time chat. We can't check his chat history, unfortunately. Okay, so rook e8. What the hell is rook e8 all about? That's the question, right? Here's the thing. One of my eventual plans is this, right? That's like the plan. If he has to take, like, that's so hideous. That's so hideous. However, if I do it now, maybe there's like h5, and then I can't go king h8 because I lose, and I can't go king h7 because takes. It's complicated. But there's like king f8, and then like this doesn't seem good, right? This seems loosey-goosey, like where the knight to play g4. Unnecessary. Absolutely unnecessary complications. So I play a move that will be useful in all areas of the game. No matter how the game develops, queen d2 is useful. Because I'm connecting my rooks, I'm finishing development, I'm getting ready to play bishop h6, bishop g5. Well, lots of things. Flexible moves. And all of my pieces are definitely ready to attack. So naturally, black is feeling a little stressed here, and he made kind of a scared move. So this one is actually black to play. I'm gonna make you try to defend this position. My favorite kinds of positions are ones where I don't really have to think. I just kind of ask the pieces where they want to be, and then I do that, and then my opponent has to think about how to deal with it. F6 to open up is the first instinct of the chat. Get real close to the pieces and listen. D4? We haven't really talked about these pawn moves in the center. So what D4 would do is, in my opinion, fatally weaken a bunch of squares. Like, I can't get a knight here right away. But, like, I also sometimes have ideas of B4, I think, in that structure. I don't know, though. Knight E7 to play knight F5. So what is your idea behind having the knight on F5? Because from my point of view, once the knight gets there, I will play G4, and then you will go back, and then I got G4 for free. And then your knight is on E7, where it has no hope or destination. Queen A4 to sort of stop bishop H6. Yes. Queen A5. Begging for a queen trade. And, yeah, sort of temporarily stopping bishop H6. This is the way to go, because not only is it a good defensive move, because it threatens to trade the queens, it also is consistent with black's play on the queen side. And it also connects the rooks. Sometimes the simplest move is the best move, actually in most cases. But my opponent did what everyone else is, and by everyone else, I mean one person in the Twitch chat, F6 was what my opponent played, because he just feels so cramped, he wants to break out. He wants to be done. I haven't actually crossed the threshold into my opponent's position at all yet, aside from the E5 pawn. But I'm really making it look like I'm gonna attack him. And now, your opponent pushed a pawn in front of their king. Your pieces are all ready for an attack. His pieces all lack coordination. The question is, do you go for an attack? If so, how? Or do you have another option on a way to play in a more strategic way? Sack something. Yeah. Or that, yeah. Never attack, the Zepcat school of chess. Yes. Double on the e-file. Knight g4 is a plan. So based on my philosophy for the tournament, it's pretty easy to find the move I played. I am not going for complications. I'm not going to look at anything, like, of course you have to briefly look at everything. Like, I briefly looked at this because it's a capture, but I don't know, like, this is how black wants to break out. Instead, I tried to think in a more long-term way, which of course is always about the pawns. F6 weakened E6, and that's what I decided to play the rest of the game on. Rook E2, Rook E1, you're pretty much close. I stuck with my knight G4 for two reasons. I'm much more prepared for him to take on E5 now, and I'm still kind of making him think something might happen on H6. Very flexible. Takes on either knight G4 or rook takes E6. Rook takes E6. That seems a little bit too saucy. That's a little... I don't think black's position is even really that bad anymore, but I'm not sure. I think knight G4 is the simplest, because now black is still stuck in this position and having to figure out what to do. He ends up playing knight D takes E5, and I'm like, alright, which knight do I take? Alright, the one that makes bishop go. That was the only thought behind that. And then I took with the knight again, because knights are not as good as bishop. And instead of... If he trades all of the pieces and leaves my rook on E5, I think that black is strategically lost. I think this position is already losing in, like, a long-term human way. Like, this position will be so hard to play for black, psychologically. Because you just have this dumbass backward pawn on E6, and I have this god of a rook on E5, and you don't have any pawns to kick the rook away, you don't have a dark squared bishop to kick the rook away, and you don't have a knight. So the rook is there. That's where the rook lives forever. And then you can just triple or something on the e-file. You can eventually bring the bishop in. This looked miserable for black, in my opinion. So he goes rook c8 instead. probably objectively lost. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think the computer would say it's lost, but from a human standpoint, I was like 100% confident I would win. Okay, now what? Because the position is clearly better for white now. H4, H5? I mean, maybe, but the thing is... Alright, so I've been reading a book, okay, called Chess for Zebras. It's the best book I've ever read. And he talks about the mistakes that people, like, at different levels make in a certain position. And, like, the storytelling that we do in chess. Like, obviously I love storytelling in chess. That's, like, what I do. Sometimes we get too attached to that story and how things should go. I actually was never going to attack him. And I think that it would be kind of a big mistake to continue trying to attack in this position when we already have plenty to play for that's more concrete and less likely to go wrong because of calculation. Yes, Chess for Zebras. It's called that based on the, like, if you hear hooves, think zebra, not horses. Something like that. He's a funny little guy. H4, bishop, H3. Yeah, that's true. I don't know if I want to do that, though, yet. Double the towers. Why are zebras better than horses? They're not better. They're more chess-coded because they're black and white, but it's just more that, you know, don't assume things, you know? The position with white having a rook on e5 is just psychologically winning. Why aren't you trading knights and playing bishop e5? That's a good point. That's very logical. That's basically what I did, but I threw a4 in first. Because his rook just left here. So I thought this was the correct time to play a4. Because now a6 is not possible, really, because the a file is open. And then after b4, like, it looks like he's gaining space, but to me, I thought he was overextended. And after the knight trade, maybe I even play a5, a6 if he does nothing for too long. Maybe. That also might be overextending. I don't know. But at this point, I'm really glad I never played c3, because my pawn structure is just, I like having it, like, real close to me and real solid, and not having anything that's just too annoying to defend. So he goes b5, I take on c6, and I go bishop e5, and I say, do it, man. Just do it. My opponent, of course, does not. He goes a5. Logical. Alright, the question is, we know we want the rook to live on e5. That's where he goes. Do we take on g7 and put the king on g7 and play rook e5? Or do we try to wait for him to spend time making us play rook e5 in some way? Is there something else we can improve? Or if not, never do anything. Yes. What are your thoughts, chat? h4 bishop h3 is still an idea. Yeah. I don't ever want to play b3, again, because it's a pawn move. Something to keep in mind, even if the rook leaves the a file, bishop takes a4 will not work, because I'll put the rook back on a4, and we're, like, you know, you move the bishop, I take the pawn, you defend the bishop, then I play b3 and take, and then I have the a file. So that's why I'm really not worried about him ever taking the pawn. I think that it's a much worse thing for him to then give me the semi-open file, which turns into an open file. Although his queen's on it right now, but I wasn't saying literally right now, because this move doesn't help me, but... King h2. You could play king h2. Queen e2 is also good. Yeah. I was kind of... I was struggling, because I was like, maybe it's better to make him take, but at the same time, like, is his king good on g7? Like, I think it's actually a lot worse on g7 than g8. Because it's on those weak dark squares. And after I made that connection, I was just like, alright, whatever, I'm just going to send it, put the rook on e5. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Queen f6? Okay. What now? And now, in this case, it's true that if you move the rook, he can't actually take this. c3 now? I'm not touching my pawns unless it is concretely accomplishing something that I'm absolutely sure of. Because I don't want to allow counterplay. f4? Yeah, I just went f4, because this is my rook, and he lives on e5. He should be able to live there, regardless of if other pieces are able to support him. The most important thing is the position is the rook on e5, looking at the backward pawn on e6. As an added benefit to f4, I really liked that I have queen f2 available to me now, without, like, getting on this diagonal without playing queen e3 and allowing things, or just being in the way, potentially. He might go h5 now. Okay. I don't really care. Like, that's fine. He's still pushing pawns in front of his king. Independent rook, yes. Okay. Opponent played queen f7. He's just kind of... Something to keep in mind. This time control was game in 80 minutes with a 30-second delay in 40 moves. And then on move 40, you get 30 extra minutes. That may sound like a lot of time to a lot of people. It is not. It's so much shorter than game 90 30-second increment, you wouldn't believe how much the increment helps. So in most of these games that I'm showing, when we're around move 30, we are stressed. We are not doing well. Rook A, E1 time. Yeah, I could play rook A to E1. I instead tickled him first. You first must tickle your opponents, whenever given the chance. Queen f7 is a move that made little sense. I'd like to force him to put the queen on a square that is goofy, like do another move that's goofy. Meanwhile, I played a useful move. And then if he tries to go like this or something, now this isn't attacked. So it's like, and this is looser, it feels like, on the 7th rank. And it looked ugly. But my opponent had other ideas. He's sick of this shit. He's like, I want counterplay. I will sacrifice a pawn to do it. He plays queen d7. This pawn is still attacked. However, it does come with a discovery of some kind. He's double attacking the pawn on a4 now. I probably had around 15 minutes, maybe 20 if I had to guess. Do we take on f5, or do we not? b3 now? We do not. Why do we not take on f5? Why chess gotta be so complicated? Because c2 is hanging. That is an excellent point. Excellent point. So, not only am I grabbing a pawn, I'm opening the c file. And so after bishop a4, there's a lot more happening than it would seem. However, there's more to the position than just that. I like to, if I can grab a pawn for free, I really would like to try to justify it and look as far as I can. So taking on c5 does several things. It wins a pawn, it opens the c file, potential counterplay for black, but it does a third thing. Getting rid of the c pawn does a third thing. Very important thing. Exactly. Bishop takes, or queen takes c5, bishop takes a4. Queen d4 is pretty nasty. Because now what we have is almost like a windmill type setup against the king on g7. Finally, the dark squares are being taken advantage of. And even in the first place, I didn't care about this pawn ever getting taken. I was never going to play b3. I didn't care at all. It was more considering the c pawn. But once I saw queen d4 and just how devastating all the threats are, I was like, there's no way that he can survive this. Okay, so I'm threatening rook takes d5. Opponent goes king g8. It is now white to play and win. Right. The chat is... Everybody wants rook takes d5. Yes. I played rook takes d5 anyways. It's not check. Doesn't matter. Because of course the queen can't take, and if the pawn takes, bishop takes, and then if king f8, this is just a mate in 2. And, you know, there's nothing else to do. If he goes here, I eventually win the queen, I think, like with this. Takes, and maybe here. Oh wait, no, that's not true. Don't do that. Whatever. This is good. You get it. So I go rook takes d5, and of course my opponent's not just going to give up here. He's going to find, like, the best defensive try. And I said white to play and win. It wasn't really true. It's still, like, +2 for white. This game is still going to go on for quite a while. I just wanted to emphasize that there was a tactic for the chat. Alright, so what the heck does black do? I didn't see a defense, so I got up and I walked away. And I was like, yeah, like, he'll probably find something that I won't, but, you know, it's his job. Okay, but how is this winning after queen g7? Excellent question. Queen g7. What now? Rook d7 isn't possible. Sorry for the coughing, by the way. I'm still sick. I'll give you a hint. This game very much does follow a storyline. Rook d7 anyways, and then frustration resign. What if we take the bishop? Ooh, I don't know, like, this can't be good. C-pawn's still hanging. Yes, also that, CL Smith. It violates the rules of no complications. I'm not going to get into a calculation battle against a 10-year-old. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. Instead, where does the rook go? Plant that sucker right back on e5. And the only thing that's different is just the same situation where black is strategically lost, but now I'm up a pawn. Kind of. Because, you know, this is happening, but, like, who gives a shit? So the bishop is attacked. The rook is a god. He plays bishop takes c2. So I go rook takes a5. And, of course, rook d8. This was what I was anticipating. The d3 pawn is the target. Now, the shapes and colors. Where does the queen go? I'm convinced I put my queen on the best square. I forget if that's true. I don't care what the engine says, I did. This is shapes and colors. Where can we put the queen where it does the most things it can possibly do in one move? So why do you like queen b6? What do you like about that? Threatening rook a7. Okay, so you pointed one thing out. This is one of the shape colors we need to connect. We want to play rook a7, yes. What are some other... Because the only other thing that the queen on b6 is doing, I guess you're saying it's pressuring e6. Sure, and the b pawn. Someone likes c4, probably to attack the bishop, pressure this pawn and this pawn. Queen f2, because chess is scary. No, we don't retreat in these positions. Never go backward. Unless it's good. That's the thing with chess. Like, sometimes that would be good, but, you know, not here. Queen e7. Wait, preventing... I would just grab the b4 pawn and try to promote the b2 pawn. That's all fine and good, but let me point out a few things. Something that wasn't really a case for a long time in the game was white's king's safety. But if the rook gets here, suddenly, like, all three of these ranks near the king are actually extremely weak. And the way that I usually lose these positions, where I'm, like, you know, just outplaying my opponent for a long time, have a winning position, is I get into time pressure, I give them too much counterplay, it gets complicated, and I either flag or blunder something and lose. We're not doing that. We're going to be solid and straightforward. You said you wouldn't attack, so queen c4 feels disingenuous. I agree. I played queen c5. Shapes and colors. a7 is still a threat, but now I'm also covering e7. So you can't block. The bishop is still attacked. The pawn is still attacked, so if he chooses to play like rook c8 or something, I can take the pawn now, and the rook isn't as powerful here, helping the bishop. Maybe that's what I was thinking. I forget. I do forget. I think it was something like that. Maybe queen e3. Sack the queen. What about bishop takes d3, rook a7, rook d7? Then I take it. That was the point. Something I missed, though, like, because someone else pointed out queen b6 that they liked, this move also prevents rook e7, but because this rook is attacked. Rook d7, not e7? Oh, hold on, let me... you're saying takes here, here? Well, I mean, I think at least I take and play this move, right? I don't know. Seems iffy. The thing is, like, I can't force this to happen. If he finds a way to prevent it, fine. The point is more that he can't possibly deal with all of these threats at once. So you just want to maximize the amount of work your opponent has to do. Bishop takes d3. Rook a7. Queen h6. And it is again white to play and win. I nearly calculated till mate in this position. Yeah, like rook d7. Whoa, is that an arrow I made? Oh, that's what I was intending? That's awesome. Yeah. And then you have queen c8. Okay, yeah. You know, that was the point. I'm glad I took notes this time, even if they're very, very few and far between. Okay, that was my point. All right, so he goes queen h6. It's white to play and win. How do we put the finishing touches on this game? I did play. It isn't the move that I played right now, but somewhere down the line, in this combination is like the best move I've ever played, in my opinion. The computer will disagree, probably, but I think it's the best move I've ever played. Queen c7 seems automatic. I would agree. That's quite a good move. That's what it's all been about. 7th rank is suddenly what we're playing for. It does seem. Okay, so queen c7, for argument's sake, let's say that he goes bishop f5 as his next move. It is kind of the only move that tries to keep shit together. g4. You could play g4. g4 feels loosey-goosey, though. because like rook d1, king h2, bishop takes g4. It's like, what's happening now? I don't want to allow any perpets. Rook f8 is a try as well. I mean, if he just gives up the e-pawn for no reason, I feel like he could just resign. Rook d1, bishop f1. Oof, you can't be doing that. You can't be doing that. One of these moves, or this, or that. No, bishop f1. Bishop f5, queen f7, king h8, rook takes e6. Yeah, you got the right spirit. So here are some things going on in the position. After queen c7, bishop f5. Let's just continue to look at the most forcing line. That's the best way to calculate, is if there's a line that's every move is forcing, because it's forcing and black or who you're playing only has 1 to 2 responses, the branches of what you have to think about are smaller. So calculating like 8 moves deep, a forcing line, is actually easier than calculating 3 or 4 moves deep on a line where your opponent has more responses. So whenever you have a line to calculate, you don't stop calculating until you're out of forcing moves, even if it looks dumb. Do not stop. A lot of the time when people miss stuff like this, it's because they stop calculating 1 move too soon. So I went queen c7, but I did see this ahead of time. So bishop f5, queen f7, king h8. And I noticed something. After queen f6, this pawn is pinned. And so taking this, he would not be able to take with the g-pawn. If he takes with the e-pawn, then the bishop will be able to come in. So I prepare this with rook d7. And while this isn't the best move, it is my favorite move I've ever played in my life, because it does win, but it also aligns with my philosophy for the tournament. This is the least complicated way to get the combination, because the rook will have to leave the c file, and then queen f6, king g8, and I played rook takes f5. He throws in a check, I go king h2, takes, mate. And he did play till mate, because that's what the kids do. But I thought it was nice of him to let me play till mate. Now, with all that being said, there was a better way to do it. I could have done it in this position, or I could have just done it here. Because if he takes, there's this, which I didn't see. But, you know, as soon as I saw rook d7, I was like, that's winning, that's solid. It's not risky at all. This is far more risky, in my opinion, than this and then this. So I went with the solid-looking move first. With the queen on f7, of course. This is not the right position, this move. So that was pretty good. I don't remember if this kid cried. I think this kid cried. The second kid I played didn't cry, shockingly. That game, man. And then the third kid cried and actually played till mate, like queen and king checkmate, and wouldn't shake my hand. And that was the number 8 rated 10-year-old in the country. This is the number 7 rated 10-year-old in the country. I actually managed not to cry after any of my 2 losses. So that was my game. King's Indian attack is overpowered. What I really loved about this game was the fact that I really didn't attack him. I just, like, built up the momentum, and, like, the threat is stronger than the execution. Like, it was like, man, I'm gonna get attacked. And so he made one bad positional mistake, and then I was like, oh, this is just positionally lost. And then I just, like, played the moves that were called for. And when there were tactics, I saw them, and I took advantage of them. So, like, overall, probably my smoothest game of the tournament. How can you do that to poor kids? They do it to me all the time, you know? Whatever.